Hi, my name is Vicky and I'm here to introduce you to my instrument, the flute. The flute is part of the woodwind family, alongside the clarinet, the saxophone, the oboe, bassoon and recorder. It's made up of three main sections. The first is the head joint, this top section here, and then this, the biggest section of the flute, is what we call the body, and then at the end is what we call the foot joint. But the head joint is possibly the most important section of the flute, as this is where the sound is made. So if I take it off to show you. So how the flute makes a sound is different to a lot of the other woodwind instruments. And it's very similar to how you make a noise by blowing over the top of a bottle. So in the same way, we blow over this hole here, and that is what makes the flute sound. And then we can add that section to the rest of the flute. So then we have all of these keys, which changes the note, so we can go higher and lower. So I mentioned that the flute was part of the woodwind family, which may seem a bit strange as my flute and maybe other flutes that you've seen are made out of metal. But originally the flute was made out of wood and had holes drilled into it, a bit like the recorder does now that the fingers used to cover up. And it was this wooden flute that some really well-known composers wrote for, including Mozart. And Mozart wrote a whole opera dedicated to a flute, the Magic Flute. And within that opera, the flute plays almost as big a role as any of the characters on the stage in the opera, and plays a number of important tunes, including this one. The flute changed forever in 1847, where musician and inventor Theobald Boehm rebuilt the ways that the keys worked. And this system remains pretty much unchanged today. These new keys created the range of notes that the flute has now, which I will show you by playing every note we have from the lowest to the highest. At this time, flutes began to be made out of different metals, and today we have flutes made out of silver, out of platinum and even gold. And this meant that the flute became louder and could be heard over lots of other instruments playing at the same time. This also meant that the flute started to be given more solos in an orchestra, and one of the most famous ones was written by the French composer Claude Debussy in his piece Prélude l'après-midi d'enfant. I really love this solo as it sounds to me like I'm watching the very first light appear as the sun rises. One particularly well-known flute player is known as the man with the Golden Flute, and that's James Galway. As well as playing in an orchestra, he recorded and released a number of well-known songs, including Annie's song. continues to be used in lots of popular songs, such as those recorded by Jethro Tull and more recently Lizzo. As well as the normal flute sound you've heard so far, it's possible to play the flute in lots of different ways to create different sounds. One of the most commonly used ones is something called flutter tinging, which is when you roll your R and create a R sound as you're blowing to create the normal sound of the flute. This is often used by writers when they want the flute to sound like a bird, and it creates this effect. One flute player who uses techniques such as these a lot is Ian Clark, who's written a lot of pieces that uses them. I really recommend checking out his CDs. If you would like to hear more flute music, I would also really recommend listening to Manuel Parhid. He's recorded lots of different pieces from lots of different times in history, and it's really exciting to listen to. I'd also really recommend listening to the whole of Prélude l'Après-midi d'Enfant. It's a really beautiful piece and it features the flute all the way through. I hope you've enjoyed finding out a bit more about the flute. Thanks for watching. Bye!